Before we get started, I want to give a huge thank you to our sponsor, Red Hat. It's our partners that make all of our programming available to everyone, free, accessible to no matter who you are. So I'm so excited to be working with them on this event today. And so on that note, I'm going to stop sharing and we're going to start our conversation with Lucy and Lisa. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks. Hi, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. So we're going to talk a little bit about the journey from individual contributor to leadership and all the different ways that you can do that. But I would like to know from both of you as we start off, how did you know that technology was for you? What were some moments in your career that really snapped into place that made you realize that this industry was for you? And we can start with Lisa.
Well, I was actually in my in the hallway in my graduate school studying business, right? And one of the ladies in my class was in her 50s, and she said, "Hey, I have this position at Motorola, and I think I could probably pay you more. You want to talk to us about it?" And I said, "Sure." And the rest is history. That was about 30 years ago.
And what about you, Lucy? We had some really interesting conversations about your background while we were preparing for this event.
Yeah. So for me, I always loved math and science. I was really good at it, and I really liked it in a high school, junior high, etc. And so the summer of high school, after my junior year in high school, actually, I applied for this program. I got selected by the University of Maryland College Park to attend their. It was this Woman in Engineering 3-month summer program. For high school students, 25 selected high school students. And so that's where they introduced the selected participants to live on campus and take intro-level engineering courses across all disciplines of engineering that is offered at University of Maryland College Park, from chemical engineering, electrical computer engineering, mechanical engineering, aerospace engineering, et cetera. And so that's where I knew this is probably rare for most high school students, but I knew exactly what I wanted to study after that program. I wanted to study electrical computer engineering. That's exactly what I did. I went into electrical computer engineering at Carnegie Mellon University, and then that's where I went the traditional engineering path, where I got a job in IBM afterwards, and I interned at a bunch of places, from Apple and other places. Then to explore where do I want to work, what type of company do I want to work at, and what type of work specifically do I want to do. And so after at Carnegie Mellon University, I went to IBM, where I did both engineering type roles and also customer facing solution architecture, technical sales type roles as well, with always a focus on cybersecurity. And then I moved on to Red Hat, and then this is where I expanded that role to where I am currently.
Great, thank you. Before we transition really to our focus of today, which is about individual contributor, leadership, and that kind of thing, I would love to hear from both of you a little bit about your day-to-day, what is your current role at Red Hat, especially since we have people from all over the world. And so it would be great to provide a little bit of context of what that looks like. And Lucy, if you'd like to go first, what kind of project, what's something that happened recently that really excited you?
So at a high level, what I do is I lead our thought leadership as it relates to security, cybersecurity, our technical and go-to-market strategy, our messaging, evangelism for security across all of Red Hat's entire portfolio, and Red Hat as a company worldwide. And I also do things like creating and presenting content to the customers, to field, to our internal sales teams, partners, analysts, and press. And so this is and also a lot of evangelism, whether it's presenting myself at security conferences like Black Hat or RSA, and also things like thought leadership type of things, whether it's writing articles at various online magazines about security, and then also making sure that I help lead the efforts for others to do presentations, our presence, and at thought leadership events, and also content that we produce as well.
Cool, thank you. What about you, Lisa?
I'm a technical leader in our sales organization. So I take all that brain power from Lucy and her teammates and bring it to our customers and plant the seeds with our customers on new technologies. I would say about half of my day is administrative, just, organizing the people and processes around getting the technical information out to our customers. And then the other half of my time is spent doing thought leadership type things. Like just last week, I got to go to the Dallas DevOps Days, 500.
We had lots of members there too.
In one place. And I was at awe when I walked into a room of 300 developers. And I just thought to myself, man, think of all the digital transformation that these people are making possible, right? And there was a panel at the end of the day, everybody's tired, ready to go home, but a panel of 8 people talking about the challenges of being a developer. And they talked about everything from, security. There was a gentleman on the panel that had lived through the security breach at Target. And then all the way to personal things like having to take a sabbatical because of the burnout and that kind of thing. So that just got me jazzed. And that's the really fun part of my job. And then I have to go back and do a few administrative things and just keep the wheels turning. So.
Great.
Yeah, COVID's over. Everyone's going to conferences now.
It seems like it does seem like that.
Big conferences with so many people now.
So actually, that's a great segue, Lucy, into something that you both said that I thought was really interesting, is that you both talked about thought leadership. And so as a lot of the members of our community, they're kind of considering, like, what does it look like to be a leader as an IC or individual contributor? And what does that look like in the people area? So I'm wondering, when you have these experiences with thought leadership, how has that like influenced your career trajectory? If you can talk a little bit, because I know, Lucy, for example, you're not a people manager, but you still are a leader. So if you could talk a little bit about that, that would be great.
Yeah, so, like you mentioned, at Red Hat and actually many companies, there is that 2-track of leadership, right? So you could be a people manager where you actually have direct reports. So, Lisa has direct reports, or you could be a leader on the IC track. I don't have direct reports, but I went to the highest level in my particular role in the individual contributor track at the director level. So what does that mean when you don't have direct reports? What it is it's leadership by influence, right? So it's things like the expectation of me at my role would be, I'm viewed as a cross-functional leader across all different teams at Red Hat, right? From corporate marketing to press relations to analyst relations to sales to et cetera, right? In the key area, in my case, in security, right? You're influencing cross-functionally to senior management, to customers at senior management at customers, or senior management inside Red Hat. You're viewed as a thought leader in a particular area. In this case, for me, it's security. So therefore, you're sought for input, right? So, what should our presence be at Black Hat or RSA? What should security look like at our annual conference, Red Hat Summit? What should our messaging be on the redhat.com as it relates to security, right? Those kinds of things. We're presenting to 10 of our key customers at an executive briefing. What should we talk about? Can you present the keynote there? Those kinds of things, right? Being a spokesperson for the industry. So in my case, I'm one of the main spokesperson for security at Red Hat, right? So that's the kind of what I mean by leadership by influence.
Great.
Yeah, can I add to that?
Yeah, I'm about to pass it to you.
Just to add to that, this week when I told people within the company that I was going to be on a panel with Lucy, I said, "Oh, can you ask her this? She knows this. Can you get her ear?" That is called influence.
That is influence, absolutely. Well, I guess, but I do have the same question for you, Lisa, because you also do this thought leadership aspect, but you do have direct reports. And if you could talk a little bit about, one, what attracted you to that track? I mean, you mentioned business school, so we'd love to hear more about that. from you?
Yes, I've always been interested in the business side of things. I have a business degree, right? And somebody had to talk me into doing a technical role, right? But I'm very thankful to her, but I still always look at things in terms of how it impacts people and business. And that's what I love about my job. I have the opportunity to do that. And as far as influencing others, one of the things that I get gratification from is seeing technical talent and applying it to a business problem. And it's usually not just one person on my team. It might be one person on my team and then 3 others from other areas of the company or at the customer or just within the technical community that I know. So it's having the influence of bringing those great minds together to solve problems and learning every single day, every single day.
Yeah, that's what's especially special, I think, about the tech industry is that even the experts, you constantly have to have a learning mindset, and like it's okay to not know things, but you have to know, of course, how to get the answer if needed. When talking with our community, though, I mean, you both laid out 2 great kind of examples of how exciting both paths can be. I do notice sometimes when talking to our community, there's like a lot of pressure that people put on themselves, like, I have to choose which one. I have to choose. And, you know, based on your backgrounds, perhaps that choice was easier for you. But we can start with Lisa, you know, as someone with direct reports, and also we've talked about mentoring. Do you have any advice for people that are feeling that pressure to choose, or is there like flexibility at all between the 2 paths in someone's career?
You always have the right to change your mind, right? And if you can't change your mind, you can't change anything, right? So I say just dive in and give it a go, give it a try. And I grew up at a company called Sun Microsystems where we were encouraged to get out of our comfort zone always. And at least every 3 years, look at doing something else just to grow, right? So that's kind of been just an area that I've always focused on and always tried to get out there and get out of my comfort zone. And that's how you grow and that's how you learn. And I've seen it through 30 years of being in this business that's what makes it exciting for me. That's
great. Yeah. What about you, Lucy? How did you kind of choose the path, or was it an easy decision? Was there questions, and if someone comes to advice from you, what do you usually say?
I think it's important to know that nothing's set in stone. I mean, so just pick one if you're not sure, right? And you'll never really know, no matter how much research you do, no matter how much people you ask about their experience, you're not going to know until you try it yourself, because your experience will be different, right? And for me, actually, I wasn't looking for this role. I mean, the role came to me. Like, I was approached, right? Because like Lisa said, you know, you want to try something new. You want to be constantly learning, and you want to be open to opportunities, right? And when you're open doing all that, sometimes the role will just come to you. People will approach you and say, hey, they'll see things that you may not have seen for yourself, about what your own capabilities, right? They're saying this role is coming up, which we think you'll be a good fit for XYZ. You know, do you want to take a chance, right? Do you want to take it on? So it may come to you without you really realizing, when you actually are open to new opportunity, when you are open to change, when you are constantly learning, you know, that kind of thing.
Great, thank you. So I have a question for Lisa, actually, about so as someone's like coming up a little bit, maybe they're on the IC track now and maybe they're not sure, but what are some ways to grow your leadership skills, kind of regardless of level, and exhibit some of these strengths?
Speak up in meetings, talk to management, your direct management and people in management roles within your company, and externally look for new knowledge, right? Explore, right? I do a lot of work in the Dallas tech community. And one thing that I've always found is that you can learn a lot from people outside your company as well as inside. So if you leverage both, you're going to learn from the best leaders. You know, the smartest people aren't always at the company you work for. So go learn from everyone.
Great. Yeah. Anything, Lucy?
Yeah, so I'll give you an example, right? So something I did, right, that kind of pivoted me from an IC role to to the leadership, like influence role that I'm in right now, right? So for example, I started out at Red Hat as a senior cloud solutions architect, right? So and I was speaking with customers, et cetera, and so day to day would be talking to customers, presenting technical solutions to them, that kind of thing. I wanted to do something above and beyond, and showcase. Basically what I did was I created an integration between various of Red Hat's technologies to showcase a particular security use case around security and compliance use cases, and how automation could help with some of these big security use cases around compliance, around config management, that kind of thing. And so I took that to our annual conference, Red Hat Summit, right? So this is about picking something and trying to see how can I make the biggest impact with it, right? So I took it to Red Hat, I applied to Red Hat Summit, I got it, and then surprisingly, I actually got one of the top sessions, like the top 10% sessions and top presenter. And so that's how I got the attention of some of the leaders at Red Hat inside the business units, right? So these are kinds of things you want to look for, opportunities to how can I get that high impact, high visibility, and jump on those type of opportunities. Because like I said, when I decided to do that, I actually didn't decide to apply to Red Hat Summit. Some technical leader came up to me and said, you really should take this because it's something I built for a customer, and they said, you really should take this to Red Hat Summit. I'm like, no, I'm not going to get into Red Hat Summit. There's no way, right? I got in. Not only did I get in, but I got top presenter, and it landed me my current role, right? So you never know what you're capable of until you try and go above and beyond, and you'll surprise yourself many times.
I'm so glad that you brought that up. I'm definitely hearing conferences. I am wearing the t-shirt for the Women Who Code conference, so we'll make sure to put all the information for that in our chat as well. But Lucy, you reminded me of something that Lisa and I were talking about, because someone came to you and really tried to empower you to take that opportunity. So before we move on to talking more about communities and open source, I would love to talk a little bit about mentorship and sponsorship, and see, first, I guess I'll pass it to Lisa. I think if you could, in your opinion, like define those two areas, and in your opinion, for our audience, and then we can talk a little bit about how it's come into play in your experience.
Yeah, it's definitely two different roles, and you need both. You can be mentored all day long and be stuck in the same position. And my real life experience is with a young lady on my team that's had a mentor for the 2 years that she's been at Red Hat, and she's done great. And I just had an opportunity for her. She just won an award for her individual contributions. And through that award process, getting her up for that award, she's now got a sponsor in the sales organization that's meeting with her to have dinner. What I wanted him to know her name and realize that she is one of the top women in the ranks in the field that should be looked at for positions going forward, right? So I've made that connection, and I think she thought I was crazy because I took her to the Dallas Business Journal Women in Technology Awards to see other women getting a very high award. And I sat behind her and I said, you know what? I'm going to be here when you get this award. And I was completely serious. So I've got her on that track.
Yeah, that's great. We're going to take questions at the end, but one just popped up that connects perfectly. So I would love to, maybe I can pass it to Lucy really quickly. Because you've talked a lot about like conferences and things like that. So, you mentioned some conferences are back. There's still a lot of digital. So do you have any suggestions for how to make these connections like digitally, I guess? Or how have you done that in the past few years, Lucy?
I mean, the nice thing about, one of the nice things that COVID brought was that everybody was, working from home. So you can, if you wanted to have a meeting with somebody in, Asia Pacific or Europe, you can, right? And they're more accessible. So, just reach out and say, I'd like to talk to you about whatever, maybe there's their career background, or if you want to ask them a particular question, I would definitely not be shy about reaching out, and people are more accessible, right? During everyone's working from home.
Mm-hmm. Great. Anything? Oh, sorry, I did not mean to do that. Lisa, would you like to add anything, or are you ready to move on to the next question?
Just around getting out there. Yeah, I am seeing here in Dallas, technical events are selling out right now. And I think there is a pent-up demand for getting out and meeting people in the technical space.
Great.
I think networking is a key, very much a thing you need to do. You need to not be open to meeting people, right? Like, for example, like if that technical leader that I talked about earlier didn't know who I was, he wouldn't have approached me and said, "Hey, Lucy, I think you should take your work and take it to Red Hat Summit," right? He knew who I was because I networked with him, and I got to know him over the years, right? So be open to that, to network with as many people as you, and don't be shy about even networking with other leaders as well, even though you may not be a leader.
Yeah, definitely. And also kind of doing it before you need to is also something we always tell people, and just enjoy it. So Women Who Code is a community, but there are lots of different communities in tech. And as we were preparing, both of you kind of talked about how open source has specific opportunities, like for leadership, or there's, the open source communities allow for leadership exploration. So Lisa, I would love to hear from you. What is it about open source or these communities that kind of lends itself to this exploration?
Well, when you think about any technology problem, it's technology, people, and process, right? And probably as coders, you're really focused on the technology piece of it, but there's also a lot of work around the processes, right? The people in the processes. And that's, what I focus on more. My people focus on the technology, and I'm more focused on the processes and how to get things done, right? But all three of those require open collaboration and open knowledge sharing. That's very common in the open source community. And then when you apply that to your leadership skills, that also helps in collaborating to solve the world's toughest technical problems, right? So the open ideas and taking the best ideas, regardless of whether they come from an executive or the developer. And so many times the best ideas come from the weirdest places. You don't expect them, but if you're open to hearing them, the openness is what drives innovation and collaboration that results in great business outcomes.
The same question to you, Lucy, about open source.
Yeah, so the thing about open source is you don't have to necessarily be working for Red Hat to participate in open source projects, right? Look at, let's say, just the Linux community, right? There's hundreds and hundreds of people, right, that are not all from Red Hat, right? So you look at these open source projects, communities out there, whether it's Linux, whether it's Kubernetes, there's a bunch of, you can be doing a simple pull request, not only for source code, like code pull requests in GitHub, but you could even make a pull request for documentation fixes, right? And once you start making these small contributions, start joining things like special interest groups within these open source communities, get to know them, get to know these leaders. That's a good way of getting to know that open source culture and collaborating on these key technology challenges from that the open source projects are trying to solve.
Thank you. So we have we're nearing the end of our prepared questions. So please, I'm seeing some questions in the Q&A. Please keep going. These are really great. I like to talk a little bit about challenges. So if you have a specific challenge or kind of issue you've had while exploring leadership, this could be something as like a challenge to the definition of leadership that you had, or a roadblock that you came across, or something like that. Either whoever's ready can go first. This one.
I have one there.
Yeah.
just understanding communication styles. Because as a technologist, I like to overthink everything. I like to dig in and examine the process or how things should work. And I work with a lot of salespeople who are, let's get the answer and go. Let's go. So I have to adjust and be a little bit more concise, as opposed to having a lot of conversation about things. I have to net it out really quickly and get my point across very quickly. And I find this every single day in my current job, and I guess through my entire career, that you have to adjust your communication style to your audience, and especially as leaders, because you're looked at as the setting the tone for the organization or for your group, and so it's very important that the tone comes across properly to get the results you're looking for.
That's a really good one. Lucy, do you have any challenges that you'd like to share to help people avoid in the future? They might have to experience it themselves as well, but
I think, for me, it's like the big challenge I can think of is when I made that pivot so I started out in engineering, as I said. My first job was I was a microprocessor design engineer at IBM for their Power and Z microprocessors, custom microprocessors. So there was an opportunity that came up that was basically like they were trying to get more technical people in customer-facing technical roles. And so it's a complete shift, right? Because it's from a traditional hands-on keyboard coding and looking at hardware description languages and all that stuff, right? So it's very different. So I was very doubtful that at the time I had no idea that it would eventually transition me into my current type of role, right? But at the time I was making like pros and cons lists, like, well, is this going to be a waste of my engineering degree? Like these people my coworkers are not even technical. It doesn't seem like they're really technical. Like I've never presented before. I've never spoken to a customer. Can I even do this? Right. So it's that was definitely a big challenge. I remember back then how stressed I was about transitioning, but I think what made me eventually just say, oh, well, I just take it and go for it was, I remember that quote from Ginny Rometty, former CEO of IBM, take on things you've never done before. Growth and comfort don't exist, right? So never stop learning, be open to opportunities that come your way. You're never going to be able to predict your future, right? So take the risk or lose the chance, right? So I knew I wanted to understand, how are customers using IBM products? Like, what are their challenges, right? Because I've been, just looking at one level really deep at microprocessor design, but I didn't really know, like, well, what are the customer challenges around, how they're using IBM mainframes, right? So that I knew I wanted to find out. Beyond that, I didn't really know, right? So, but that opportunity, and technology is not just about coding. You don't just have to have a coding job, right? It's very vast what you can do with that. So be open to it. If you have even a little interest, but you don't really know where that's going to take you, just go for it, and you'll figure it out. Things will fall into place.
Great. Thanks. I actually want to, before we go on to our last question, I'd like to think a little bit about challenges a little bit more from the side of thought leadership or influence. We've had a couple of questions about like providing support for team members that are struggling. So I have a two-part question. Is one, what kind of support are you seeing for team members or colleagues that are neurodiverse, or like making sure that everyone is included? So that's my first question. Yeah. I can rephrase it.
I thought you were going to go to the second part.
No, I'll do the first part. Thank you.
Okay.
Lisa, okay. Let's do that first, and then I have a second question. Yeah. Why don't you start, Lisa, as the people manager?
Yeah, as I mentioned, people, process, and technologies, and some of the most brilliant people come from different communities, right? And often those communities are overlooked, but if there's one person that can identify that talent, that brain power, and bring it to a problem, it's amazing what can happen. And I'm so blessed to have a very diverse team right now, and have seen through many years very diverse teams come together and tackle a problem that I didn't think could be solved when I looked at the problem. But when you get those diverse thoughts all in one place, all working together, coming up with solutions, it's amazing.
Great. Are you ready? Lucy, do you would you like to add anything, or are you ready for part 2?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I didn't fully get it.
I guess I was trying to synthesize many questions about the same topic that we often get, which is about diversity of backgrounds of team members, and if you're seeing any new support mechanisms coming into place on your own teams or in your company that's like helping people like thrive regardless of their background.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see organizations getting more serious about diversity and inclusion, right? So get a lot of different programs around that, a lot of different webinars and different learning opportunities and ability, like a Q&A session type of things. You know, definitely go look within your own organization because for that diversity and inclusion office, right? So that they have a lot of opportunities there too, but also just the seeking out opportunities to work with different, you know, diverse teams and diverse groups of people as well.
Great, thank you. As you were talking, Lisa, and you were talking about kind of supporting and empowering your direct reports, but then also leadership, this is making me wonder a little bit, like a lot of leadership requires like emotional labor and kind of taking in other people's experiences. And I'm wondering if you have any advice, like for a community that's transitioning into management, how to succeed, how to not burn out, you know, if you are the one having to like deal with a lot of interpersonal conflict.
All right. I think it's the people and the people you're working with, really. And if they used to want you to leave your personal life at home. But what we've come to realize is that it impacts your work environment. And the more you can understand about a person's personal life and what they're juggling at home, the better off you are. And just last week, you know, that developer conference that I talked about, well, the marketing lady had to pick up her kids. And I said, hey, I don't have kids. I'll take the late shift. I'll be there. And she was like, oh gosh, I'm so grateful. Thank you. You know, and those types of things go miles for keeping people involved and engaged in their work and making things work easier, right? And, you know, I work with a gentleman who's an early bird. I think he gets up at 4:30 and it's on email. And I just tell him, well, I'll be on at midnight and we'll complement each other. But just know that I'm probably not really wide awake at 7:30 in the morning like you are, right? But we'll use those differences to collaborate and to make our team better.
That's a great answer. Thanks. So I'm going to go now to some of the questions from our audience, and we have time. So anyone in the audience, please feel free to keep sending in your questions. So from Violet, Violet has a question about a little bit back to your experience on taking on a leadership role. And Lucy, if you're ready, I'll pass it to you because Lisa just had the last question. But when you were first starting off, you know, you said one of the examples you gave was like speak up in meetings, that kind of thing. Did you ever find it challenging to speak up and feel like taken seriously? I think that's one thing that people have concerns about, kind of regardless when they're starting out, like perhaps they're a little bit not confident based on their level or something like that.
Yeah, so I think in my current role, I don't have that challenge just because by the time I reach this role, I think people know who I am and people, and they know what my role is and what I'm capable of. But in the early parts of my career, I definitely felt that, right? There is this, sometimes I got this assumption by some people thought, you know, she doesn't know anything, she's not technical, when in reality, I'm more technical than they are in some aspects, right? Like I built a microprocessor, for God's sakes. So like, you know, so they automatically judge you. I have gotten that like many times, but you can't take these things personally. I always say you have to have a thick skin. These people come and go, right? I mean, they're not like your parents or anything like that, right? I mean, don't take it personally. Just prove to them that you can do it. Just prove, I mean, that just show your capabilities, and everything will just, the real truth will come out, right? So I just stopped giving a crap about what people thought. I just, okay, well, you think that or whatever, I don't care. I'm not letting you get in my way, right? So that's just the attitude that I've always taken. And then eventually, they will see you as that leader. They will see you as the, capable, right? So it'll come, once you prove that you can do it. Yeah.
That was a fantastic.
Thought to add to that too, if you don't know the people that are going to be in the meeting, have a meeting before the meeting. And a lot of times you can talk through the problem outside the full meeting and get an understanding of what they're thinking, and also get the buy-in. Then you go into the meeting and it's easy.
That's a great tip. I love that. So we have another question from someone named Becky, and I'll have you, Lisa, start it off because Lucy answered the last question. But Becky wants to know, how do you get away from being boxed in to a specific role? So I don't know if Becky's talking about in many positions, but I'm assuming Becky means like at their current organization. But I was wondering, Lisa, if that experience speaks to you at all, or how can you kind of break out of that box?
ask questions or ask advice on how to get to those positions that you want, and go talk to people in those positions and get their advice on how, if somebody's wanted that position before and got it, go talk to them and find out what they did to move into those positions. And, as women, we tend to be very helpful, and we'll take the time to talk through some of those things. And sometimes, especially I find myself, I have to talk through a problem to help solve it, right? And you might need to talk through it with 2 or 3 people or multiple people. It might take a few years to get to the answer, right? What your purpose and what you really want to do, right? Look for coaches, have a board of directors of people that you trust that will give you honest feedback.
I would also look at job requests that you would look at different, different job postings, right? Different companies that would interest you, and that it tells you exactly what they're looking for, right? And figure, if you don't have those skills, figure out a way to build those skills, and then just start applying. You may not get it, you may bomb the interview, but I guarantee you, for every single interview, you'll learn something. Right. So, okay, that's why, that stumped me. I better learn that. Right. And then sooner or later, you won't be siloed to a role, because you're going to apply to these roles, and when you get those skills, you're going to get it. Right. So,
yeah.
And don't think you need to know everything. If there's a list of 10 things that you need to know for that job, apply if you have 3.
Yeah, yes. That's a good point. So for example, at IBM, I was doing mainframes and Intel-based processors, and then I was Red Hat. I've never done Red Hat Enterprise Linux or anything, but they're not looking for you to come in as expert. They are looking to see that you have core skills like customer facing, like the ability to present. So don't think you have to know everything for that role. Just look to see, do I have the core skills they're looking for that role? And can I prove to them that I can learn in a very quick amount of time their technologies and what they're looking for specifically for that company, right? So that's how I handle that.
This is a good segue. We actually had someone that asked about interviews, but was open to it not being answered if it wasn't on topic, but we're talking a little bit about interviews now. So, this question is mostly directed towards Lucy, but of course, Lisa, if there's anything, as someone who hires people, we'd love to hear your opinion. But I think a lot of the people in our community, technical interviews can be very stressful. And Lucy, you mentioned every interview is a chance to learn what you bombed, but is there any, do you have any tips for kind of working through that and building resiliency to move on to the next one?
Yeah. So I think it depends on the role, right? So if you're going to apply to a software development or coding type interview, they're going to make you code on the spot, right? So most companies who are looking for like Google or software development engineering roles, they all have you coding on the spot. So so you're going to have to be a strong programmer, right? Software developer. So it really depends on the role. So if you are going to do like a coding interview, then review all those algorithm textbooks and all the different, there's how do you study for a software development interview, like there's sample questions, right, that you can look through, right? So I would do that, but again, it depends on the role and how you would prepare, but that's one example as for a software development.
Great. Thanks. We're getting a lot of good questions, so I'm just trying to organize one moment. Oh, this is a great, yes, sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
You're organizing. I was just going to add one point to that. Don't think of if you bomb an interview as a failure. Don't think of it that way. Think of it, you probably learn something from that experience, and you build on each one that you do and just get stronger and more powerful with each one.
Right, agreed.
That's great. We have another question, which I think is really interesting, about strategizing a little bit. So they're wondering, is it typical to get promoted into management like from your company, or is it possible to just have a technical background and then kind of apply to a different company for that leadership role? Or what's your experience? Or, I think obviously it depends a lot on the situation, but I would love to hear kind of your reaction to this question.
It's usually easiest internally because you already have some knowledge of the people and processes within the company, and also the technology. If you're coming from a technology role, you've got a little technology background and you know something about the people and the processes. And so many companies hire from within, so that it's a little bit easier, I think, within to make that leap because you can sell yourself on the company knowledge.
Yeah, I would say internally, definitely, like from a technical role to leadership type role, like just kind of like my own experience with my own role, right? But also, the smaller companies, like kind of where when you go to a smaller company and you go from a technical role, you can jump to a leadership role pretty quickly, right? Like a startup type company or something, right? But the bigger companies, if you're really going into a leadership role, they are looking for key leadership traits, right? So you want to build those traits, right? Or skills, right? That, like I talked about earlier, around influence, around cross-functional collaboration and leadership you did in a cross-functional level. What kind of high impact things you did? How did you drive high revenue? Those kinds of things are what they're looking for in a traditional leadership. So you don't forget about the title, but do you have examples of you doing that? That's what what they're looking for.
Oh, that's a great answer. So we have two questions here that I'm going to combine. They're both asking for resources of like good open source projects to participate in, but then also resources to kind of help you participate in open source. Yeah.
I was at DevOps Days last week, and they put up a slide of all kinds of books out there. And Lucy probably knows the names of the projects better than I do, but there's all kinds of resources in the DevOps community for that. Right?
Yeah, great. I mean, so literally, I just looked up open source projects in Google. I mean, you can see the first link there, TensorFlow, right? Google's open source project, Flask. There's, of course, Linux, there's Kubernetes, there's all kinds, there's like hundreds of them. There's too many so you would just kind of look through, see what you're interested. Are you interested more on the developer side? Are you more interested on AI, ML? Are you interested on, so you kind of look through it, and I'll guarantee you'll find some sort of open source project.
That's great. So yeah, I think the question is really, how do you evaluate one that would be good? But it sounds like just follow your interests. Would you say that's your advice? Yeah. Okay, great.
Follow your interests and just start kind of reading, and each of these GitHub pages has like so many. You could be spending hours and hours and weekends trying to read all this stuff, right? So just get into it, just jump in and read, and just like that's the only way, right? That you'll really know what you.
Yeah, and go to meetups.
Meetups, that's another one, right?
Yeah.
Meetup.com has a bunch of places. You just meet these people and just talk to them, and right. I mean, they're all opened up too. Like they're all like they're not locked down anymore. So
yeah. Thank you very much for that segue, because I was going to plug that Women Who Code Networks have, there's like a TensorFlow event almost every day. We also, if you go, I'll put the link in the chat. We do run like a Linux Foundation scholarship every single quarter, and we did have a DevOps one. So we do also definitely look to us for our events and things like that as well. So we're going to start wrapping up here, but Maria put an amazing question in the chat that I think would be a great way to kind of move towards our end. And Maria wanted to know, what advice have leaders in your own experience shared with you that you have kept and followed, like you keep going, and that you also think back to now?
Well, I work for Sun Microsystems, and Scott McNeely was the CEO, and he was always the one that said, not all the smart people work at our company. Go learn from others.
That's really good. Yeah. What about you, Lucy?
I think one thing is you can always do more than you think you can. So we have a tendency, many of us, to doubt ourselves, right? That we can't, no, we can't, I'm not ready for that, or I can't do that, or there's no.
Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, you can always do more than you think you can do. You know, don't be afraid to push yourself. Don't be afraid to try new things. Be open to the opportunity, even though you're not 100% ready. If you have an interest, just go for it. You may not get it the first time, but you'll learn what you need to get it the next time. Okay.
That's great. Yeah, Ruth Williams in the chat also shared about an interview experience that they had, but the person was really, really nice and gave lots of advice. So even though it did not go well at all, it was not time wasted. So for our last question, I would love to know, as we wrap this up, you both work on really exciting things that are constantly changing. So I'll pass it to you, Lisa, first, but what are some advances or emerging technologies that you are really excited about? Like, what's next that you're excited about?
Oh, AI, machine learning, robots, and drones. I've just been following it because the potential is there. And I had a great experience at the University of Texas at Dallas this spring, where J.B. Hunt brought their self-driving semi that drives between Dallas and Houston for display and for people to learn about what's coming in self-driving vehicles. And one of the interesting engineering problems they had was there's cameras on those, and they had to figure out a windshield wiper to get rid of the bug splat on the cameras on the self-driving trucks. Who would have thought that was an engineering problem? But it was so interesting.
What about you, Lucy?
Yeah, I think the AI ML space definitely is really interesting. There's a lot of investment that's happening in the technology space, technology companies, right? Like we talked about Google, like Google is doing a lot of investment, but so is a lot of other software companies, right? Like, the AWS, the Facebooks, et cetera, right? So I think it will be interesting to see, especially when how is that going to impact things like security tooling? There's a lot of AI that's being built into that, advances as it relates to edge computing. And then the other thing around, quantum computing and how that's going to transfer how cybersecurity is done almost to the core. And then also as all these companies are moving to the cloud and figuring out how am I going to develop apps in this new way, in this new world, using this new DevOps or DevSecOps way of doing things, that's forcing collaboration between developers, operations, and security, right? You're seeing a lot of transition inside organizations as they're transforming their business to do this. So I think these are all examples of and edge computing, as I mentioned earlier, where you're not just confined to the data center and you have all of these IoT devices at different edge locations. And those are the unique challenges around security, around management, and more. So yeah, these are all areas that really are interesting to me in the emerging tech space.
That's great. And they seem like millions of new potential jobs that people don't even know, like you can't even fathom or imagine yet. And that's what's so exciting about technology and why it's so fun to work at Women Who Code. So we have come up on the hour. I want to thank you both so much for spending your time with us, spending your time preparing and lending your voices to our community. And I also really want to thank Red Hat and want to point out to the audience the red hats in the background of both of their backgrounds. Is there anything, any closing thoughts or anything you want people to know before we end today?
Oh, I thought of another thought from a very powerful executive who told me, we need all the brain power we can get in technology for a better country, for a better world, for better companies, and for better lives for ourselves. Mm-hmm. It stuck with me.
That's going to stick with me. Yeah. Any parting words, Lucy?
Just like I said earlier, just be open to possibilities, opportunities. Its success is not always going to be from point A to point B. It could be much more of a dance, right? Going from here to here to here to here, right? And discover what you are truly interested in. I think if you kind of just stick to what am I interested in, what am I good at, what excites me, and then kind of just pick, even though you're not completely ready, and just apply, see what happens.
I love the advice. Well, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for attending. We're going to close it down here, and it was wonderful to meet you both.
Good. Take care,
everyone.
Bye-bye. Keep charging.